Today we're looking at Peachtree's new GAN-1 digital power amplifier, and I've tested this in two different listening rooms with two very different sets of loudspeakers, and I've conducted side-by-side comparisons to two other kind of similar amplifier setups.
This video is brought to you by Roon 2.0, the revolutionary music player designed for true music fanatics. Click to roonlabs.com for more information.
Welcome back everybody. Yes, the GAN-1 is not at all like the Peachtree audio amplifiers of yore. We're a long way now from the Class AB designs that had the little window and the tube buffer behind it. We're also a few years down the line from when Peachtree decided to move over to Class D amplification. But the GAN-1 isn't really a Class D amplifier. It's called a digital amplifier, and we have to ask straight away, what the hell is that? It's where the signal arrives at the amplifier in the digital domain, travels through the amplifier in the digital domain until it gets, well, just before the output stage, it's converted with a DSP chip from PCM to PWM, which is a bit like DSD. And that PWM signal is then used to drive the devices on the output stage, to switch them extremely quickly. And sometimes this type of amplifier is called a power DAC, and I believe that terminology was invented by Wadia, but I could be wrong. But the thing is, there's no DAC chip inside. If you look at your average Class D amplifier, there's a DAC chip inside that, but there is not inside the GAN-1. And the GAN-1 differs from digital amplifiers coming from Lyngdorf and from Bluesound in that it does not use MOSFETs on its output stage. Remember how I said the PWM signal switches those devices on and off very quickly? They're not MOSFETs, those devices. They are in fact something called a GAN-FET, which has been chosen, as I understand it, to be switched on and off much more quickly than a MOSFET, which therefore lowers the amount of dead time, because obviously if you're switching on and off more quickly, then the device is idle for a lower amount of time, and apparently that lowers signal distortion. And according to Peachtree, the GAN-1 features no negative feedback in the signal path. And I think that the GAN-1 is the only power amplifier on the market right now that combines a power DAC architecture with GAN-FET output devices. But if you know of one, please let us know in the comment section below. Other digital amplifiers like those from Lyngdorf, Bluesound and Technics come preloaded with a digital front end. But on the GAN-1, there is no such thing. There's not even an analog input. There is only a single coaxial digital input socket, which is capable of accepting PCM up to 24-bit 192 kilohertz. So then how on earth do we feed the GAN-1 with a signal? Well, clearly it has to be a digital signal. Now we can use a PC or a Mac with a USB to SPDIF converter, but I think more affordable and more common, and basically what I've used both here in Lisbon and in Berlin, is a Bluesound NODE, because that gives us streaming smarts, it gives us a top panel touch control, it gives us a subwoofer output, which we'll come to later, and it also gives us, I've forgotten what I was going to say, and it also gives us analog source digitization. And if we've got a 2021 version of the Bluesound NODE, we also get HDMI ARC connectivity to hook up our TV. Now in Berlin, I had the GAN-1 powering a pair of Vivid Audio Kaya S12 stand mount loudspeakers. We made a video about those a year or so ago. They're the orange Barber Papa type speakers. I used an older version of the Bluesound NODE to feed the GAN-1, so one without the HDMI ARC. Instead, I used the Toslink input to connect my TV. And the whole thing sounded wonderfully clean and precise, but not that kind of pins and needles, spiky kind of precise. The GAN-1 is a much more elegant sounding power amplifier. Of course, the Kaya S12 really cry out for the addition of a subwoofer, which is where the bass management inside the Bluesound node and its subwoofer output really come into play. I inserted the KEF KC62, high passed and low passed the signals accordingly. And I gotta say, yeah, it was just, I was speechless a little bit, just an absolutely glorious sound from that setup. And it really made me doubt the need to keep owning the Klipsch Forte 4. A couple of points right off the bat here, because I know curious minds will want to know. No, I did not notice any kind of quality loss from running the Bluesound node down at around 20 and 30 and 40 and 50% volume. And for those of you with sloppy fingers and who are worried about just blasting the volume slider up into essentially a territory that would blow your speakers, inside the Blue OS app, you can set your own maximum and minimum settings so that accidents like that don't happen. And if you think that the Bluesound Powernode and the Bluesound Powernode Edge can do all of this from a single box and for less money, you would be half right, because the Bluesound node feeding the Peachtree GAN-1 gives us a much more substantial, a much chewier mid-range. And going side by side between the Bluesound Powernode and then the Node and the GAN-1 with the Lost Highway soundtrack, the David Lynch movie soundtrack, I noticed that the GAN-1 setup has much better low-end control and ever so slightly better speed with rhythmic transient attack. God, that sounds really audiophile pretentious, doesn't it? But yeah, just the kind of the lickety-split nature of sound. I think the GAN-1 is a bit better than the Bluesound Powernode. And none of that is really surprising when we take into account the GAN-1's regulated 400 watt power supply inside the box and the fact that it has 200 watts per channel into 8 ohms. That's over twice that of the Powernode and over 5 times that of the Powernode Edge. I hadn't played Banco de Gaia's Last Train to Lhasa, the 3 CD limited edition actually. I hadn't played that album for years, so I kind of wheeled that one out as I was undertaking this comparison between the Powernode and the GAN-1 with the Node. And it was very clear to me that the GAN-1 with the Node offered more detail. It took us further into the mix because the Last Train to Lhasa album is a very complex and rhythmically charged album in places, but there's a lot going on. And I just thought the GAN-1 gave me a better look deeper into that album. It made for a more immersive listening experience. And now if you're thinking that the Node plus the GAN-1 is pretty much the same on features and price as the NAD M10 V2, of course minus the Dirac Live Room correction, then you should know that the GAN-1 and the Node beat the NAD in some areas and equal it in others in terms of sound quality. And I know this because I brought the GAN-1 from Berlin to Lisbon in my hand luggage on the plane. And I think it's really down to the GAN-1's very rugged, well, not rugged because it's nice and smoothly finished, but it felt very strong, the aluminium chassis. And I was very confident in putting that in my hand luggage. I just wrapped it in a t-shirt actually, and it survived no problem. And I probably wouldn't do that with another kind of Peachtree amplifier or with the NAD M10 V2, but never say never. And going side by side here in Lisbon with the GAN-1 and the 2021 Node versus the NAD M10 V2 with the Zoo Soul 6 loudspeakers, it's kind of easy to hear the GAN-1 as essentially the more microdynamically relaxed of the two amplifier setups. The GAN-1 isn't as urgent sounding as the NAD with something like the House of Love's State of Grace, their new album, very good indie rock album. And that's an advantage if you're more of a sort of lean back kind of listener than you are a lean forward or a lean in kind of listener. And with indie rock in mind, the Peachtree is also more conducive to playing indie rock all day for several days in a row. And another album I'm thinking of right now is the new Hold Steady record called The Price of Progress. It's not the best recording in the world, but I think the Peachtree gives it a little bit of polish, a little bit of smoothness, like a pebble, right? Smooths it like a pebble, more so than the NAD, which can be a little bit spikier at times. And the GAN-1 with the Node as the front end really, for me, is the better of the two, ever so slightly. We're talking audiophile differences here, so like this wide, ever so slightly better with player placement on the soundstage. And that, for me, really brings out the best from the last two Regis albums. And if you find that the NAD is a little too brilliant up top when listening to Regis's In This Is the Light That You Miss, then you might want to take a listen to the GAN-1 from Peachtree because it just dials it back just a smidge. And for those of you who think that Regis is just all about straight between the eyes techno, think again, because that album from I think 2020 was made with the same producer that worked with Einstürzende Neubauten. Glad I said that okay, because Olaf's always been, I guess, coaching me to say that. Anyway, Regis made his album with that Einstürzende Neubauten producer, and it's much slower, and I guess I would call it industrial broken beat. There's lots of space in it for an amplifier like the GAN-1 to really shine because it leaves enough space around the instruments without thinning them too much. And I think that's one of the features that I really love about the GAN-1 as a digital amplifier, in that it doesn't thin the sort of the tonal mass of instruments as some digital amplifiers can. I'm thinking mainly of the Lyngdorf TDAI-3400, which is incredible in many respects, but its one weakness is that its tonal mass can sometimes be a bit too skeletal, which is why you really need to add a subwoofer, and then that problem tends to go away. So I guess what I'm saying is, in summary, that the GAN-1 with the Node as the front end is a more relaxed, a more refined, a more detailed, a more easeful take on the NAD M10V2. And I think really the only reasons why you might go for the NAD is because of its Dirac live room correction. If you need that, if you're in a small room, I completely understand, because you want to correct for bass. Or if you really do love the color display on the NAD, because again, I wouldn't criticize you for wanting to go for that, because obviously the GAN-1 doesn't have that. But I think if you've got your room sorted, or if you're working floor standards, or if you're keen with a stand mount and subwoofer setup, then the Node with the GAN-1 is a very, very solid alternative to the NAD from a sound quality perspective. Of course, if you want to know how the GAN-1 compares to another kind of amplifier or how it works with another kind of speaker, then I'm sorry I can't tell you, because I put everything that I did in the time that I had to do it in this video. And if you're wondering what other devices might have a variable output SPDIF socket that you can feed the GAN-1 with, then I'm not quite sure. I mean, for example, I know that I've got an old Marantz CD player that has a volume control on it, but I'm not sure if that volume control is applied to the SPDIF socket on the back of the CD player. So you'll have to contact the manufacturer of the device in question to find that out. It might be possible that an old squeeze box would work with the GAN-1, because I'm pretty sure that its volume control is applied to the digital outputs on the back, but I'm not 100% on that. Anyway, if you liked this video, if you found it informative or entertaining or a bit of both, then please consider giving us a like down below. If you like my attitude to high-end audio, in that I'm prepared to tackle kind of, I guess the GAN-1 is more of a niche product than most of the things that I now cover on this channel. I mean, an all digital amplifier with a single digital input, that's not for everybody, but it is a fantastic solution for somebody who wants to go down that path. So if you dig that, then please consider subscribing to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. Negative feedback is essential, I believe, the way I understand it, to Class D amplifiers, but it is not essential to digital amplifiers like the GAN-1. Or rather, it is not essential to digital amplifiers like the GAN-1 because it has GAN FETs in the output stage. And I think this is the only amplifier on the market at time of taping that combines a kind of power DAC type architecture with GAN FET.